Good morning. So what is this series exactly? Well, after my dozen or so times of playing through the Pirate101 story, I realized I haven't really ever read the dialogue. Sure, I know major plot points, but I was never enriched by all the dialogue and story this game has to offer. So that is what we're doing today, and for the next few months. I started a new privateer with the explicit purpose to read all the dialogue of the main story and truly learn why it is what we do. Sit back, relax, as we head into the story of Pirate101, experiencing the nuances you may have overlooked, and endure potential side rants about the relevance to today's world. If you like this format, please consider subscribing, commenting, and liking to show me you're enthralled by the Pirate101 story like I've been. Without further ado, let's sit by the fire and get started. Hello and welcome back to the I Started Privateer to read all the dialogue in Pirate101 series. You may notice a little bit of a setting change. As you can see in the top left here, I do not have a membership anymore. It expired. I didn't renew it, not for like any big reason like I think the game's gonna die. It's just with maxing out this last character, I didn't really see a reason to continue my membership, at least for now. So the rest of the series will be held in this little set that I made on the privateer character. We got the fireplace, we got some milk and cookies, we got a Christmas tree. Even though it's not Christmas anymore, it's the end of January as I'm recording this, but nevertheless. So we start off book 8 by speaking to One-Eyed Jack. We knew from the end of book 7 that One-Eyed Jack was the only person that we knew that also knew who Sally was. So he's probably our best bet. And he says that he hasn't actually seen Sally in weeks because she's on some new top secret mission. And he tells us that the person who hired Sally, which was Roscoe Ratso of Scrimshaw. And so that's probably our next best lead. And as we're about to leave, One-Eyed Jack tells us that the Monkeesan government wants us dead because we incited the Civil War, and then also for the 1,000,000 bananas that we that we dropped with Don Quixote. We speak to Roscoe, and he reaffirms it's some sort of hush-hush top-secret government operation, and he tells us that her boss is in a Monkeesan flagship near a vortex. And so Monkeesan flagship, hush-hush top-secret, it can mean either one of two things. It's either Cortez in the Civil War, or it's the Monkeesan crown trying to kill us. Luckily, it's the former. It is actually Cortez that hired Sally to break someone out of prison, and Cortez promises us a reward if we help her because he hasn't seen her in weeks either, so she has also been trapped in Fort Elena, the prison in Port Regal. Cortez tells us to go to the nearby island in the Tradewind Skyway, which is the Marleybone hideout where all those Marleybone guys are, and to speak to Bosun Munn, who tells us to speak to the Captain Dan. And he has a plan to get us into Port Regal, but he needs us to do a few things first. And if you've played Pirate101, you know this section. It's the very long section. Oh, hi, horsey. It's the very long section with the, 10 ships, and then the 6 ships, and then the other ship, and then you have to kill the troggies and the sewers. It's basically that. That's the premise of this. He wants us to get food for his troops, clear out some troggies, defeat a ton of ships to get the attention of the Brass Monkey, Cowpersteal de Brass. Once we defeat all the ships and defeat all those troggies and mummies, we then have to beat the bosses of those troggies and mummies to sort of calm down the violence that's happening in the sewers. And then we face Count Prestio de Brass for the first time. We beat him, and then he is our prisoner to get into Port Regal. And once we arrive in Port Regal, we take Brass to the governor of Port Regal and make our way over to Gilbert. Now, Gilbert understands we're here to find Sally, but offers employment in trying to recover a package first that they've been waiting on. And we talk to Rackshaw, who's this dude who oversees the package delivery, and says that he was robbed. So we go back to Sullivan and Gilbert, and they want us to help again and help with the delivery. So as we exit Sullivan and Gilbert's shop, Blind Mew actually stops us, and he gives us some intel for a gold. And he tells us that the thief was a Valencian unicorn, which I think is also pretty interesting. There's a Valencian in Port Regal who was stealing things. And it turns out that that guy is Iago. We find that out by speaking to Corcoran, who was the deliverer of the package, and he tells us to speak to Bill Bobstay in Scrimshaw to help find Deadeye and Iago. And Deadeye is Iago's boss. So Bill essentially tells us that we're going to have to convince Deadeye to give us Iago's location, which just means beat him up. And Deadeye tells us that, and Deadeye calls for a parlay, so we don't kill him, and it tells us that Iago's hiding in a vortex in Port Regal. And then once we get there, we defeat Iago. And actually on a privateer, what's interesting is you can recruit Iago. Where is he at? Right here, Iago. Unicorn villain. He's a swashbuckler. He's pretty cool. He gets a few promotions. He's kind of nice. If he had more abilities, or if he had like Relentless, I think he'd be pretty good. But yeah, he's just a story companion you get for privateers. He doesn't have any dialogue though. And then we return to Sullivan and Gilbert. So Sullivan and Gilbert finally give us the information that we've been asking for about Sally. And they say that she visited a few weeks ago and in her effort to free someone from Fort Elena prison, she herself got imprisoned. And so we need to go to the person that she was working with, which was Catbeard. And later on in the story, we do get Catbeard. Everyone gets him, but this is Catbeard for reference. And so we go to him, and then Catbeard tells us that they've been trying to find and free Napoleon Gwyn, as he is in Pirate101. And we actually have a puppet show for this. Let me fix the audio. So let's hear the story of... Yep, there's 3 parts. Let's hear the story of Napoleon Gwyn, part 1, 2, and 3.
Where to begin? Some say Napoleon Gwyn is the most dangerous mind in the spiral. I don't know about that, but I can tell you he is a military genius, and surprisingly short. Oh, but please don't tell him I said that. He has this thing about his height and wearing tall hats, and, you know what? Forget I said anything. You have been to Polaris, right? No? Oh my, well it's a lovely place if you like glaciers, and penguins, and pickled herring.
So that's the first part, because once you do it in the quest, Catbeard gets sidetracked by the pickled herring.
Oh yes, Napoleon Gwyn, military genius. Well, you do know that he managed to climb from shipping clerk to Emperor of Polaris in only 10 years. It's true. Granted, the Penguin Revolution helped, but that's still a very impressive track record. And once he became emperor, oh my, that's when it turned scandalous. He rebuilt the Polarian Navy from the ground up and attacked all of his allies at once. Valencia, Marleybone, and Monquista. The greatest military powers in the spiral. How's that for ambition?
And that is part 2, and then here is part 3.
What's that? Oh, Napoleon. Well, he was betrayed, of course. Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed you knew the rest. Marleybone started a revolt in Napoleon's backyard, and Valencia unleashed that clockwork armada. They turned the tide. Napoleon was captured and imprisoned here, at Fort Elena. Fort Elena is also where they're holding our friend, Mustang Sally. And I have to say, it's an absolute beast of a prison. Thick walls, stout gates, huge guns, and an army of guards. Cortez and I intend to free Napoleon. It's a crazy idea, I know, but Cortez wants Napoleon to win his little civil war in Monquista, and as for me, well, my fee will keep me and Mr. Norrington in pickled herring for the rest of our days.
And then he gets sidetracked a little bit more by pickled herring. So essentially what's happening is Catbeard and Cortez are trying to free Napoleon from the prison so that Napoleon can act as a military tactician for Cortez's civil war. And Catbeard obviously doesn't really care about the civil war. He just wants the money, as any good pirate does. So Catbeard's plan to help us get into the fort is to start a war between Valencia and Marleybone, as they're both occupying forces in Port Regal. If you go around Port Regal, you see that there are Armada ships and an Armada fortress, as well as Marleybone ships and the Marleybone prison, and then obviously Port Regal itself is a Marleybone colonial town. To start this war between the two nations, we attack Marleybone ships and then steal the governor's daughter. And don't worry, she kind of consents to it. It's kind of weird. She's very positive about the experience and being taken. And then after that, we attack Armada ships and then sabotage the Armada fortress that's in the Port Regal Skyway. And so while we were at the Dreadnought, the Armada fortress, and sabotaging it, Marleybone actually captured and imprisoned an Armada general. So in response, the Armada sieged the fort. So there's this big battle going on while we sort of walk in, sneak in, and take our prisoners. And so When we go in, we first try to locate Catbeard's man on the inside named Benedict, and he gives us the key to all of the cells. And so we pass by Count Bastille de Brass, which is very funny, and then we find Sally and Napoleon. And something else is interesting is that we pass by Fool. After freeing Napoleon, we also have to get some of Napoleon's troops and right-hand man. And with all of our people freed, we then have to return to Catbeard. And so Catbeard's plan to resolve this war that we started between Marylebone and Valencia is to return the daughter of the governor and then bring Sally and Napoleon to Gortez. Now here's a little bit of foreshadowing here. Catbeard tells us that the war should be over soon because Marylebone has the advantage. But as we see later, once we get to Marylebone, that is not the case. But that's a little foreshadow spoiler for you there. And while we were returning the governor's daughter back to the governor, he tells us that in the siege of Fort Elena, Count Bastille de Brass actually escaped. So we should be on the lookout for that. And then finally, we can return to Gortez with our prisoners in hand. And he tells us that Napoleon will help his civil war. And then we tell Sally about what's been going on with Cool Ranch and her father and her lover. And that's kind of the end of Book 8. It seems a lot shorter when it's put into this format, but it does take quite a bit. There's a lot of ship battles, especially with the leading up to actually getting into Port Regal. But I mean, I think it's a fun area. There's definitely a lot of implications for the rest of the game when it comes to the Valencia and Marylebone War, and then also Gortez's Civil War and helping him out, which doesn't really get explored after he wins the Civil War. Spoiler. But yeah, that was Book 8. I hope you don't mind me being in this set and not actually traveling to the locations where all the people are. But, you know, I don't got membership, so that's just how it's going to be. And I will see you guys next time.